everyone to the Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting for May 25th, 2022. We'll go ahead and get moving along. Up first on our agenda is a report from the chair and vice chair, and I don't have anything, Maureen.
I have nothing.
Okay, we'll move on to a report from the director.
I think I covered what I was hoping to cover in my presentation, so
I think you
good.
have to speak into the microphone louder.
I think I am, but all right. I'll put my mouth on it. We're good. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, thank you for that and review, Nick, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions about that, but I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and I have a couple housekeeping items on this. So we do not have minutes for May 11th. We only have minutes for April 27th that were in our Dropbox for review. Consent agenda items are not public hearings. I've received some cards to speak, but unfortunately, these are not public hearing items. But I'm going to separate these out and remove them from the consent agenda. So the very first item is the approval for the minutes of April 27th, and I'd be looking for a motion to approve those.
I'll move we approve the minutes for April 27th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Andra. Okay, I have a motion from Maureen and a second from Anda. Let's go ahead and take a vote. John?
Yes.
Brenda's not here. Rick?
Yes.
All right, Amy? Yes. Adrian?
Abstain.
Maureen?
Yes.
Mike?
Abstain.
And Levi?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. I actually do want to back up. I did have something I wanted to review. When I reread the policies and procedures.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
real quick, I think you left Commissioner Gant out of that vote.
What?
Andra did not vote you didn't call on Andra to vote.
I didn't vote. I didn't call you? Oh, I didn't write anything
Yes.
down either. So sorry. Andra? Yes. Thank you. My bad. All right, that motion passes. So, okay. In review of the policies and procedures, it does state that if you abstain, you do need to indicate why. Obviously, for minutes, it's given that you weren't in attendance. But in other public hearing items, if you abstain, please be ready to give a very, very brief reason of why you're abstaining. And that abstention should never be that you feel like you have a conflict of interest. The conflicts of interest should be stated up front to recuse yourself, and then you would leave the room. So when I reread the policies and procedures, I realized I hadn't been asking you to do that. Okay, thank you all. Let's move on to the next consent agenda item, which is case number PLN PCM 2021-00024. This is a time extension request for 150 South Main Street Apartments. And I will turn it over to the director and Paul to give an update on anything they've heard on this one.
Yeah, so we did receive 2 written comments requesting that this item be removed from the consent agenda and a public hearing be held on it. Our city code does not require a public hearing for time extensions. And so that is, I'll let the attorney weigh in, but that's not necessarily something that the Planning Commission is required to hold a public hearing for. You can have a discussion whether you choose to or not on that, or on the matter of the time extension as a whole. But the code does not give any sort of direction to the commission on when it's appropriate or not appropriate to grant a time extension. In the past, it's not unusual to have time extensions. The commission has not held public hearings on those past time extensions. They've been placed on the consent agenda. Prior to us using consent agendas, they were just placed under the director's report, and we'd give a quick update and a synopsis. So those public comments that we received were referring to a plan development approval and The related, that does have a few things related to time extensions. However, the application that's on the consent agenda was not a plan development, and so those are not relevant to that application.
All right, just to follow up on that, City Code section 21A 10020 dictates that you hold public hearings when the code says you have a public hearing, and the various types of land use applications, plan development, conditional use, and design review in this case, those are all prescribed as things that you have public hearings for. There is nothing in the code that says we hold a public hearing for a time extension. So that's one of those things where you won't have a public hearing because it is not authorized. And as Nick indicated, there isn't a standard on a time extension for design review. And I'll just read from the code. No design review approval shall be valid for a period longer than 1 year from the date of approval unless a building permit is issued or complete building plans and building permit applications have been submitted to the Division of Building Services and Licensing. An extension, this is the important part, an extension of 1 year may be granted by the entity that approved the application. Extension requests must be submitted prior to the expiration of the design review approval. So this language, an extension may be granted by the entity that approved the application. It doesn't give you any sort of criteria by which you can approve or deny, and that's an oversight. Some of our code sections have warts. As Mr. Baird, who is in attendance, will tell you, he drafted Utah Code Section 109A 306, which at some point we're going to come to bloody fisticuffs over, indicates that if we do not specifically prohibit a land use application, we must approve it. So you don't have discretion on a time extension for design review because our code, unfortunately, doesn't say if these criteria are met, then you approve the time extension. One of those things that we need to add to the list of cleanup issues. But so in some there's no public hearing, and there's no really ability to deny this. The reason why we don't have a public hearing, just to keep talking for just another second. The reason why we don't have a public hearing on a time extension is because there's an opportunity to appeal the substantive approval. And in this case, the persons who have submitted comments requesting a public hearing on this have appealed your prior decision on the design review approval. That went to our appeals hearing officer, and then it was petitioned for review to the 3rd District Court, where it still is. And to allow comments, public hearing on a time extension is sort of a backdoor to appealing that item again. So the courts wouldn't allow it.
Okay. Thank you for that, Paul. All right, so we do have this open for discussion if planners or commissioners want to discuss it or have further questions. Otherwise, I'm open for a motion. And unfortunately, there's no motion in the Dropbox, so you'll have to... There is? I don't recall it. Go ahead then.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Andra.
Based on the information provided by the applicant, I move that the Planning Commission approve a 1-year time extension for design review petition PLN PCM 2021-00024 for the 150 South Main Street apartments located approximately 136, 144, and 156 South Main Street, subject to compliance with the conditions of approval stated in the record of decision letter dated July 15th, 2021.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Andra and a second from Mike. Let's take a roll call. Andra, you start.
Yes.
Don't miss you. Mike.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
And Levi.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. And then let's move on to the public hearing portion of our agenda. Our first up is Eucalypt Corners, Plan Development and Design Review at approximately 1012 West, 200 South. These are case numbers PLN PCM 2021-00866 for the preliminary plat, case number PLN PCM 2021-00870 for the plan development, and case number PLN PCM 2022-00176 for the design review. And we have Amanda as our planner on this tonight.
All right. This is a presentation
Oh,
for.
you gotta really get that microphone closer to your mouth.
Okay. The project is Eucalypt Corners. It's a plan development, design review, and preliminary plat at approximately 1012 West, 200 South. The project consists of 16 single-family attached townhomes, each on their own lot. The subject property is located in the TSA Urban Neighborhood Transition District. Staff is recommending approval of all three petitions with the conditions listed in the staff report. The plan development is required for lots without frontage on a public street, a reduction in the side yard setback adjacent to an RMF 35 zone from 25 feet to 17 feet, increase in a front yard setback from 5 feet to 7 feet 3 inches, an increase in amount of permitted open space, and a reduction of a 10-foot landscape buffer. Design review approval is required for a reduction in ground floor glass. The subject property is approximately 0.53 acres and is undeveloped. The 16 units would encompass 8 two-bedroom and 8 three-bedroom townhomes in 4 separate buildings. The applicant is Pascal Meyer, who is representing NeighborWorks Salt Lake. NeighborWorks Salt Lake intends to sell at least 20% of the units to those whose income is 80% or less AMI. Each unit has designated parking. The 2-bedroom units have 1 stall, and the 3-bedroom units have 2 stalls, for 24 stalls total. Buildings 1 and 2, which front 1,000 west and 200 south, are approximately 37.5 feet in height. Buildings 3 and 4, which have frontage along an alleyway, are a maximum of 28 feet 6 inches in height from established grade. And there is a landscape courtyard in the middle of the development. Some site photos. There's existing single-family homes that abut the property along 200 South. And then other photos of the alleyway on the bottom and property across the street on 1,000 West. Standards of approval, I reviewed the TSA UNT zoning district, TSA design standards, plan development, design review, and preliminary plat. And then I'll just dive into the modifications. The first request for plan development approval is for lots without frontage on a public street. Lots 13 through 16 located in buildings 3 and 4 have frontage along the alleyway rather than 1,000 West or 200 South. Setback modifications. So the minimum side yard setback adjacent to an RMF 35 zone is 25 feet. The request is to reduce the setback of building 1 with frontage on 1,000 West to approximately 17 feet. When you combine the setback and the abutting alleyway, which is 16 feet, it results in a 33-foot separation between the building and the properties to the north in the RMF 35 zone. The applicant's also asking for an increase in the front yard setback. I should mention that this project was originally approved in 2017, but they did not obtain building permits or apply for a final plat within the 1-year time period. So it came back, and since then the code's changed a little bit, so they've had to make modifications. There's slight modifications from the original proposal, but one of them is asking for an increase in the front yard setback. So at least 50% of the street-facing facades must be within 5 feet of a front or corner property line. To accommodate the stairs and the railings leading up to the individual units, the applicants requested a front yard setback of approximately 7 feet 3 inches on the 2 larger buildings with frontage on the public street. And that just ensures that the stairs don't encroach into the right-of-way. Landscaping modifications, properties that are zoned TSA and adjacent to an RMF35 zone are required to have a 10-foot landscape buffer. A landscape buffer does not include pavement of any sort. It's purely live material. The proposal includes a 5-foot sidewalk along the perimeter of the subject property. Buildings 3 and 4 that have frontage along the alley are set back from the property line from about 25 feet. Or 41 feet from the RMF properties to the north, but they're not proposing a 10-foot landscape buffer. There's the sidewalk and then also a sidewalk leading to each unit. The rest of the yard area is landscaped though. And then the applicant's also asking for an increase in the allowable open space. The TSA zone requires 1 square foot of open space per 10 feet of land area, up to 2,500 square feet for transition areas. With all the landscape as well as the interior courtyard, it takes up about approximately 25% of the lot area, which is about 5,700 square feet. So they are asking for an increase in that allowable open space. And then I'm going to the design review request. The applicant's requesting to reduce the amount of ground floor glass, and that's measured between 3 and 8 feet. In residential uses in the TSA zone, the percentage is 45%. And depending on the building facade, they're proposing between 7 and 41%. This is because part of the underground parking garage is above grade. It still meets the definition of a basement, but it's about 4 feet above grade. And so the actual uses with the glass, the residential uses sit above that. So the ranges between 7 and 41%. And then a design review is also required because the project did not obtain 125 TSA points, which is the threshold for an administrative approval. And then the preliminary plat, this could be approved administratively, but we just included it in the application because it's tied to both of the plan development and the design review. And they're asking for modifications for the lots without frontage and then the setbacks. And based on the information and the findings in the staff report, it's planning staff's opinion that the request generally meets the applicable plan development, design review, and preliminary plat standards of approval, and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the request with the following conditions. The applicant needs to complete a subdivision improvement construction agreement with engineering division for public improvements, and then they also will be required to put no parking signs along the alleyway. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Commissioners, any questions for Amanda at this time? Okay, one other thing I read in the policies and procedures, which I forgot about, is this is the time where we would ask questions, and commissioners should not be making statements or comments at this time until after public hearings. And I haven't always instigated that or made you guys do that. So I'll start being better about that. So no questions for Amanda. And we have the applicant, Pascal Meyer.
Yes. Should be here.
Do you have a presentation you need Amanda to load, or? Okay.
No, but you can scan through here if you need the site plan.
Welcome, Mr. Meyer. You've got,
Thank you.
if you just state your name for the record, and then you have up to 10 minutes.
Sure. My name's Pascal Meyer.
You're going to have to speak either really louder or really close into the microphone. That's how it gets recorded, is in the microphone.
How's this?
Better, thank you.
My name's Pascal Meyer. I'm with Carpenter Stringham Architects. I appreciate your time and tonight and your consideration of the project. I represent NeighborWorks, the owner. I think the representatives are here. Would you mind if they came and sat at the table? Yeah, David and Rob?
That's good. State your name for the record, please.
Hi, everybody. My name's Rob Roque. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for NeighborWorks Salt Lake. My name is David Foster. I'm the real estate manager for NeighborWorks Salt Lake.
Your microphone may not be on. Is the green light on?
It is.
Okay, you might have to pull it closer to you.
Yeah. My name is David Foster, and I'm the real estate manager for NeighborWorks Salt Lake.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. You have up to 10 minutes. You don't need to take all that time, but if Mr. Meyer gets finished and you want to make comments to us, please do.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to thank Amanda for her assistance on this and the planning staff. As she referenced, this was a project that we designed and submitted back in 2016, went through the process and got to the point where it was approved and we were ready to start construction. The owner put it on hold, and here we are 4 years later when construction costs are much less, ready to start the project. It was originally designed to just maximize the amount of residential housing units we could get on this lot, these 3-story townhomes, 2 and 3 bedroom mix. And that is really what drove the design to utilize the property the best we could to provide as much housing as possible. That's really in line with the desire and mission and vision of the owner, NeighborWorks. So when we resubmitted or reapplied here 4 years later, we discovered that some of the zoning requirements had changed. And in an effort to really just provide as many units as we could, we've worked with Amanda to find the appropriate way to get this approved, and that through the development agreement and design review. If I could just speak architecturally for a moment about what's driving the design. I think one important factor of this design was maintaining connectivity or providing connectivity to the neighborhood. And we've done that by orienting the front of the buildings to the street with the porches and the main entrances coming right off of the public sidewalk. And we've also designed the building, we feel, in a way that it's residentially scaled. It's a unique building, some different materials, but I think we really thought about the scale of the neighborhood and the homes and designed to that, and also provided, I think, some good architectural articulation along the facade, so it didn't seem so massive. It had that pedestrian residential scale to it. I think in terms of what will really benefit the residents there is that connectivity to the neighborhood, having that interior open plaza with landscaping and seating. That would allow for semi-private interaction and utilizing that space. As was mentioned, we parked below grade. That allowed us to get more units and also I think just keep cars unseen, and it allowed for residents to have their own private parking garages. All but 4 units have private rooftop plazas and that are oriented to the streets, the public streets. And so from an experiential standpoint, residents there will have opportunities for public, semi-private, and private interaction with these units. The facades were designed with durable materials, which one was required by the zoning ordinance, but 2, also the owner desires to put a quality product here, and so we used a variety of durable materials to create interest and articulation, materials that would be attractive and also low maintenance. So that's an overview, from an architectural standpoint of what drove the design. There were a few neighbor comments. I don't know if it's appropriate to just speak to those. There was a request to widen the alley to the north. Through our submittal, engineering indicated that we wouldn't be required to do that. There was made mention of the structures being high, being too tall. We're well below the allowable height in that zone, that TSA zone. And then there was a mention of providing on-street parking, just probably due to some concerns about visitors that might want to access the building, but not park underneath. And we did propose that back in 2016, and changed the curb cuts to allow for on-street parking, but that was just no longer approved. So that speaks to a few of the neighbor comments and concerns we'd heard. I think with that, maybe I'll just give NeighborWorks a few minutes to speak to their vision and mission.
Yeah, thank you. Part of what we want to do here, part of the reason I love my job is when we do this type of development as a nonprofit, we put a lot of thought into how it can contribute back to the community. In this case, we really want this development to be part of the NeighborWorks Community Land Trust, which means that these houses that we put in here will be significantly more affordable, but also permanently affordable as on top of the land trust. We agreed to do 20% of the homes at 80% and below the area median income. That's great. We want folks that are having a hard time being able to afford a home in this market to be able to afford to live here in the NeighborWorks Community Land Trust at this location. And this is a great opportunity to do so. It's very rare in this neighborhood, in any neighborhood really, to be able to get this opportunity where essentially we will be able to mortgage the improvements on top of the land for just that cost. You basically cut the cost of a home in half. And that stays in place forever. For 99 years into perpetuity, we want to steward this land. We've also looked into some of the history of what we have, working-wise, we've been calling it Eucalypt Corner. Actually, those of you that may know a little bit about it, the history of that area, there used to be a bowling alley there for a long time, Maltaire Lanes. It was named that because they could smell the malt from the Fisher Brewery, and they had a bowling alley there. There's a lot of really great history, and some of the family that used to run that bowling alley is still around in the neighborhood. We'd like to call the development Maltaire Lane, keep some of that history alive, and really be able to pass that down as stewards with the new homeowners and the generations after that are able to stay in that neighborhood, maybe where their parents grew up, and we are just deeply committed to keeping it that way.
How much time do we have?
You have about 2 minutes left.
I'll just end with this. After listening to Amanda, it does seem like we're asking a lot here, but it's all in the desire to just provide as much housing as possible. And when you look at some of the adjustments that we're asking for, the considerations, I don't think it's detrimental to the community or to the property. We're certainly, if you look at our drawings, our landscape plan, our elevations, we're doing everything from a design standpoint to provide the best product possible here on this location. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant at this time? I just have one. Are you going to provide like air conditioners or air fresheners in the scent of malt for your tenants?
Well, I think that we'll consider it. Maybe have a Maltaire brand of air conditioner.
There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Are those two streets, 10th West and 2nd South, is there no parking there on those corners where you guys are?
I guess there might be parallel parking along there.
No parking?
I don't know if it's signed no parking.
Yeah.
And I don't know how big that lane is, that if people were to park there, if that would be,
10th West
that would
is
work.
like
It's really wide.
so wide.
It's
the
really
widest
wide.
street I've ever
Yeah.
seen in my life.
You could park out there. It's really wide.
And 2nd South is like a regular road. And that alley, you'd be jealous because it's nice.
I would be jealous.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would
some
be.
alleys are really, really narrow. That's actually a really nice alley.
Okay, if you guys would just hang tight, we're going to move it to the public hearing. After that, if anything comes up during that public hearing, I will give you the opportunity to address them if you wish. And then I'll bring it back to the commission and we'll enter into our discussion phase, but we may have additional questions for you at that time. So with that, I will open the public hearing. And Casey and Nick, do we have any community council representative here that you know of?
I thought I saw someone, but it looks like they may have left. But you may want to just
All right,
call.
well, I have a card from Dan Bethel. Are you here? There you go. If you want to head up to the podium and please state your name for the record, and then you'll have 2 minutes to give your comments.
My name's Dan Bethel. I'm one of those people who's been connected to Euclid Avenue for the last 73 years. I came home from the hospital there February 73 years ago. I still own my grandparents' house there. I have 5 properties there. And I'm very happy to see this development. I think they've done a great job. There's some confusion about the street parking. The last time I saw their proposal, they had no parking along both 10th West and 2nd South because of the height of the building. The fire department was requiring that they be able to access the building at any time. So it looks like they've removed that, and I'd like to thank whomever did that, because they're going to need that street parking. And I'd also like to support the housing on the alley. I was out there working on one of my properties the other day, and I watched a guy ride his bike around my car looking to see if I'd left any of the doors unlocked. And my tenants down there had a big problem. The day before yesterday, a lady was out there on drugs, and she was brandishing a knife, and the whole neighborhood were out there trying to get this woman calmed down. So having these units along the alley, I think, is an excellent idea because they can help defend the alley by looking out on it, defensible space. The only issue I do have 6 units down that alley, and I'm wondering if the cars are, and I also have another apartment building that accesses everything off of an alley. That apartment building is a 20-foot alley, and it works great. But this 16-foot alley, I'm a little bit worried about when people want to drive in and there are other people driving, that they won't be able to pass each other. That's why before I suggested adding 2 or 3, maybe 4 feet to the alley so it were 20 feet instead of, and it looks like there's an amply wide sidewalk running along the alley. Maybe if that were level with the paving, they could actually drive on the sidewalk. I don't know, but
Oh, that's time.
that's my only criticism, that, and I was wondering how the dumpster's going to work.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bethel. Is there anyone else in attendance that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. Casey, do we have any email comments? Are you monitoring that? I don't know who is.
We'll check on that. We don't have any yet.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close the public comment period, and if you want to take a second to comment on anything Mr. Bethel said, now's your chance. You can also not if you don't want to.
Well, I'll just, speaking to the trash dumpsters, can't talk enough about those. They will be enclosed on that north side and gated, but the truck's going to have to pull up and pull them out and empty them and then push them back in. So that's a little disruptive to that alley when that happens. And then as far as the alley width, the only thing I'd mention is engineering just said the 16-foot wide public alley will not be widened. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will now close that part. We'll bring it to the commission for a discussion. And then if you do have additional questions, you can pose them to staff and or the applicant. I'll just say, as I always love to talk about alleys, I have one behind my house that I access via my garage. It's very busy. There's a church behind me, and there's also the post office parking and a bunch of other people along the street, and it is definitely not wide enough for 2 people to cross, but we seem to manage. I've been there for 24 years, and it hasn't been an issue that we haven't been able to work out. So if it doesn't get widened, I think people will figure out how to work it. So I should just have a T-shirt made about alleys. So, if there's no discussion or further questions, commissioners, we do have 3 separate motions. So if anyone is ready to make a motion, please remember we'll be doing 3 separate ones.
I'm willing to make a motion.
Okay.
Based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary plat request, PLN SUB 2021-00866, for the project located at approximately 1012 West 200 South, subject to complying with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Adrian and a second from Maureen. Let's go ahead and take a vote. Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Levi?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Andra?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes.
Okay, I'll make the second motion.
Thank you.
Based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the plan development request, PLN PCM 2021-00870, for the project located at approximately 1012 West 200 South, subject to complying with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, I again have a motion from Adrian and a second from Maureen. Let's take a vote. Andra?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Levi?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, last one. Based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the design review request, PLN PCM 2022-00176, for the project located at approximately 1012 West 200 South, subject to complying with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, for the home run, we again have a motion from Adrian and a second from Maureen. Let's take a vote. Andra?
Yes.
Levi?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously as well. Congratulations. Good luck on your project. I wish you much success with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a good night. All right, moving on to our next agenda item for public hearing. It would be the Quincy Plan Development at approximately 1106 South Redwood Road. This is case number PLN PCM 2022-00074, and our planner tonight is Liz Hart. Liz, is this your first time with us?
Yes, it is.
Welcome.
Thank you.
While Liz is opening her presentation, keep going. I'm just going to introduce her. Liz Hart is one of our newer planners in the office, and I think this is the first time that she's been in front of the Planning Commission. So
I will be very nice. I promise. I'm sufficiently sugared up with a cookie, so you got me at a good time. All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So this is a plan development request for property located at 1106 South Redwood Road. The request is for a modification specifically to Code Section 21A 36010B1, which requires all principal buildings on a subject lot having frontage along a public street. So the applicant's requesting a modification to that to allow 14 buildings of the 16 that will be on the lot to not face a public street. Staff is recommending approval of this request. So the project proposal is a townhouse-style multifamily development Again, it's located on South Redwood Road. It's on the west side of Redwood Road. It's in the Corridor Commercial District. There will be a total of 16 buildings, and I'll go through the site in a minute. And those 16 buildings will house a total of 89 units with a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom, and each unit will have a 2-car garage. These are just some renderings of the buildings the applicant's proposing. Your top left is the front facade, and then the bottom right is the rear facade, which shows that 2-car garage there. So this is the site configuration that the applicant's proposing. You can see those 2 buildings fronting Redwood Road right on at the front to the east, and then the rest of the buildings are right behind it. And then in the center is a kind of like a community open space area. The site's accessed through a drive that's on the south side of the development. This is accessed right from Redwood Road. And it's also going to be the access to the vacant lot that you can see on the screen to the south, which is also being proposed as a multifamily development that you guys will see later on. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the neighborhood character. So multifamily residential is a permitted use in the commercial corridor district. This area kind of has a lot of different mixes of uses. So the zoning map, you can see Redwood Road is on both sides, it's commercial corridor. Then to the west, you've got manufacturing. Then to the east, behind all the commercial, is the existing residential. So R1 5000 and SR3. So this just kind of gives you a better idea of what's built around there. So again, your residential, it's all existing, is to the east. The subject property is outlined in red. So there's existing commercial just across the street on the east side and to the south. It does have a mix of like markets, restaurants, some retail. I know there's a couple of banks around there. Access to the 9 trail is just north of it. It's about like a third of a mile north of it. And then the M1 district has a bunch of different uses. You can see on this map that there's a school out there, there's a sports and events complex, but a majority of it is more manufacturing type uses, and then to the north is a little more auto related type uses. So again, staff is recommending approval of this. It does meet the plan development standards. It does generally meet zoning standards, and it does provide an enhanced product with the proposed modification to the site. I'm happy to take any questions. I know the applicant has a more detailed presentation too.
Commissioners, any questions for the staff at this point? No? Okay, thank you, Liz. We do have the applicant, Colton Cronister. Do you have a presentation you need her to load? Got it, perfect. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you would just state it for the record, and then you'll have up to 10 minutes.
Of course, yep. My name is Colton Cronister, representing CW Urban as the applicant. It's good to see faces in person. So as a lot of this was covered previously by staff, but just wanted to go over a little bit more detail if possible. So the proposed Quincy project is 89 for-rent townhome units. I'm sure if we want to talk about CW Urban, we can. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with some of our product. We've done quite a few things around the city, but all in-house architecture, general contractor development firm. Here's a project map, just sort of highlighting where we have done projects before, and if you have any questions on this, we can discuss that, but just kind of an introduction. Some community details, 89 for-rent townhome units. As Liz mentioned, 2 to 3 bedroom units, all with 2-car attached garages. We have a program central amenity space, and we've discussed the activation of the 9-line corridor, with that being one of the staples to this development, the proximity there, and we're also including a professional landscape design that's a central amenity that's provided for the residents. So here's the location, just 3.7 acres, 1106 South Redwood Road. Here's our site layout. As you can see, the orientation of the buildings with a central amenity space here in the middle that provides pickleball courts, open playing space, social gathering areas, and then on this part to the north, we're programming community gardens. Here's our floor plans. There's 3 plan types ranging between just over 1,400 square feet and just over 1,700 square feet. And we can share this in more detail. It's hard to see on that screen so far away, but we have the floor plans here. And as mentioned, all 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2-car garages. This is sort of a snapshot of that central amenity space with the pickleball courts, a central playing space in between them, with a naturescape feel, less programmed, but allowing for creativity, and central seating area with a covered seating area as well that will have barbecues and places for the residents to gather. And then as you can see, this would be the south end of that green stretch, showing those community garden boxes. With the 9-line corridor being as close as it is, we've programmed ample bike storage, also bike repair and tire inflation stations, hammock hanging areas, and just a general central amenity space for all of these residents to benefit from. So this portion in mobility is something that we feel like this development really enhances that Redwood corridor. Between all 3, walkability, bikeability, and public transit. The 217 bus route stops right in front of the development every 15 minutes. You don't have to cross the street to get to it. And that would be heading south. But it provides great access to public transit there. Bikeability, like I mentioned, providing bike storage. All these units will have their own garages as well, so residents can keep their stuff secure. And then, as Liz mentioned, that the 9-line corridor, the 9-line trail, is just 1/3 mile to the north. And then walkability, we believe that this site plan, as I showed, with separate buildings and not all buildings having frontage on Redwood, rather than a large apartment structure, it provides more of a community feel, provides a different and unique type of housing that's not found in the area currently. And it does add a walkability element where there are connected pathways between all units to the central amenity space, out to Redwood Road, to the public transit. And it, we believe the product will enhance the walkability of Redwood in the short term and in the long term as Redwood grows and changes. So moving on into the master plan integration, this development sort of touches 3 plans: Plan Salt Lake in general, the West Side Master Plan, and the 9-line Master Plan. From the Plan Salt Lake perspective, it provides access to a wide variety of housing types for all income levels. This, as I mentioned, this type of housing isn't currently found in the area. It creates housing opportunities like that aren't currently there. In terms of the West Side Master Plan, it fills a void of lacking multifamily housing. It resides on Redwood, which has been identified in that West Side Master Plan as a key location. It integrates well with the surrounding uses to the south. There's some commercial use, retail use across the street, restaurants, other retail use, and commercial uses as well. And it does this without negatively impacting the existing residential to the east of Redwood Road. And then lastly, the 9-line master plan, like mentioned a couple times, it's located a 1/3 mile from the 9-line trail. The Redwood node is something called out in that 9-line master plan, and we believe that with this proximity, this will help activate that Redwood Road node of the 9-line master plan. And as mentioned again, we plan on providing ample bike facilities and storage. So kind of lastly, community integration. This plan development review allows for medium density housing. As Liz mentioned, multifamily is permitted, and we explored the idea of one single structure, a larger apartment style building that wouldn't have required the plan development review, and it just didn't sit right. It didn't feel like it belonged. So exploring this route with the plan development approval, we truly believe it provides a better product than what could be delivered just as if well, I guess with the other option. We believe the scale of the development, like I mentioned before, doesn't negatively impact existing residential to the east, but it also integrates with the existing uses around, and it does provide a neighborhood feel within itself as a community, while also integrating well with the existing neighborhood. And just lastly, just to cover some things one more time, integrated walking paths to activate pedestrian activity, on-site bicycle storage facilities, activation of the 9-line trail, pedestrian-friendly building orientation on Redwood and within the community, transit access on bus route 217, and then activation of Redwood Road as a multimodal corridor now and in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cronister. Any questions for the applicant at this time? I have just some clarifying questions because these load really slow for me here, and I can't always get my answer right away. Is what's fronting Redwood Road Building 1 and Building 2?
Yeah, so there are 4 building types. It's just they're in pockets.
I'm mainly interested in learning more, trying to visually determine what I'm looking at, of what those buildings that are fronting Redwood Road, which ones they look like.
Yeah, and as you can see, all these buildings look fairly similar. There's just some slight variations in plans, and it's fairly similar across the board as well. With to the north there is a 6-plex, and to the south there is a 5-plex.
Yeah,
And
I'm not so concerned about that. I'm wanting to understand when I look at my staff report, the building perspectives. Which are the 2 buildings that are fronting Redwood Road? Are those officially building number 1 and building number 2?
So that would be a building number 1 and a building number 3.
Building 1 and 3.
Yes. You'll have building number 1 to the north to the south as the 5-plex, and building number 3 to the north as a 6-plex.
I don't see a facade for building number 3, but I may not be able to pull it up fast, but I don't see one.
Let's see if I know it's a long reach, but up here on the presentation you can see building 1 is the top left and building 3 is the bottom left.
Okay, we'll move on, and Liz, maybe you can help identify what page that is on the staff report so I can figure out where to go for it and give me time to load it. Any other questions?
Yeah, is the only difference the number of units between, that's it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if you want to, go ahead, Rick.
Did I hear you say that this project would have affordability for all income levels?
It provides, it's a rental for rent product, and it provides a style of housing that currently isn't found in the area.
So so that's no then?
There's no restriction or income limitation, but it is a market rate for rent townhome product.
And it's probably a typically smaller floor plan for 3 bedrooms, which
Correct.
is inherently for new construction lower income, right? Because
Yeah.
of the small square footage per bedroom.
Yeah, what we have seen, we've seen units like this attract small, younger families who are looking for places to live that don't necessarily require an income restricted unit, but something that will provide them the lifestyle and the type of unit that they need.
Yeah, we are not finding building 3 in our staff report. I have a building 1, 2, and 4. But I'm interested in trying to see how that engagement is along that street frontage for those 2 buildings. So if Liz can work and see if we have that available after the public comments, that would be great. Any other questions? All right, if you want to hang tight, we'll open it up for the public comment period, and then we'll bring it back when that is finished. All right, I'm going to officially open the public comment period. Is there anyone here from the Community Council? Okay, so I will call upon you. You'll go to the lectern, state your name for the record, and then you'll have up to 2 minutes to speak. If you would like to go first, since you're in the front row, that's great.
Hi, I'm Laura Thomas, and I am a resident that lives like just east to where this building, this property would be. I think you're right, there is nothing else in the area like that. I think having some consideration for affordability would be crucial for the area, since a lot of longstanding families are being displaced right now from that area, particularly by young homeowners. I was one of those. So another thing, I think I would like to know kind of what construction is going to look like on Redwood for residents while that's happening. And also if your pickleball courts are going to be open to the community, because there is nothing in the area for that.
Okay, thank you. You want to?
My name's Taylor Larson. I just wanted to know, like, price-wise, like, what's the range that you're thinking about? Because I understand, I'm definitely in favor of it, but yeah, I'd just be curious what market rate is. I feel like it's a very broad term.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other hand, at least. Please.
My name is Alec Myers. I'm a resident of Salt Lake, and I'm also one of the landowners for the parcel exit directly to the south. We are in favor of this project. We have been working very closely with CW Urban on our own plans. We have been engaging with them and UDOT to great length to consolidate our drive access, to kind of share one drive rather than 2. I feel like it kind of helps a lot with the Redwood Road situation. Our project is in for review. We'll probably be talking to you guys in about 2 months. We are planning a 58-unit townhouse project that will be for sale. We believe it's very complementary, kind of a different architectural style, similar sizes, for sale versus for rent. I think it kind of adds a lot and kind of shows that this project, although it's kind of pioneering in a lot of respects, kind of takes a little bit of a guts from a developer to kind of jump into a space like this that's been vacant for so long. The nice thing about it is there is no displacement going on in either of these parcels. They've been empty lots for decades. And as Salt Lake kind of pushes further and further west, this is a very high quality product. And you know, I've walked through 5 or 6 of the CW urban projects in the last couple of years, and they do a good job. They have a good reputation as developers and builders, and I'm happy to see it. And we're kind of side by side with them to bring housing to this area.
Okay, thank you. Please.
I'm Tyler MacArthur. I'm Alex's business partner. I'm also one of the partners that owns the property right to the south of CW Urban's parcel. I've actually been working out on the job site. We have a job site trailer. I've been there for about a month. I just want to get a feel for the neighborhood, and I'll just share a couple of anecdotes. One is that 217 bus stop is very heavily used. I see people there all the time. Every 15 minutes, there's people there that are using that bus stop. And one of the issues is that there isn't any sidewalk improvements currently in front of either of our parcels. So I'm excited to see sidewalks and landscaping go into the park strips here. I think it's going to be a really huge improvement for that entire stretch. Just yesterday, I see people, they come up to the end of the sidewalk and then they go and walk on Redwood Road along the parcels right now. So just getting these projects developed is going to be really good for the safety and walkability of Redwood Road. And second, I had a business owner come and talk to me. He's one of the business owners that's immediately south of us. He owns a shipping and logistics company, and he was really excited about this project. He couldn't be here tonight, but he just was talking about how he's excited to try to perhaps hire people from these communities. He needs more employees, and I think that just kind of underscores the fact that there's tons of employment to the west of here, and housing is really scarce. And so we're bringing housing closer to, I think, where a lot of these people are going to be working with the new airport and the inland port and all the other industrial manufacturing things going on there. So just wanted to make my plug of support for these two projects.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment on this item? Okay, any email comments that were received, Casey? None? Okay, with that, I will officially close the public comment period and bring it back to the applicant. If there's anything you would like to address, now's your opportunity.
Yep. To address the comments on affordability and the
You just
price-
need to speak into your microphone, so that's fine.
Trying to double eye contact here. With market conditions and prices of goods right now, truly, if I told you a market rate rent, the number wouldn't be accurate because things are changing and the market's so volatile that we at this point don't have an accurate number of how much someone would pay monthly in rent. But I can say that our goal and our target resident here is someone who is looking for a place where a small family can start their life, a place that's attainable. And like I mentioned before, we don't have any units programmed as affordable units, but our primary goal is to be an attractive place for a young family or a young professional that needs a starting spot to come and have a place to be. We've seen a lot of affordable applications come through the city recently. A lot of those are on the west side of the city. So we felt that given that this is a type of housing that is missing in the area, it was something that would benefit the neighborhood. You had a comment about the pickleball courts, and we can discuss it internally. Given the amount of units and there just being a couple courts, it is something that we should discuss internally if they're open to the public or if it is something exclusive just to the residents of the development. Trying to think of what questions I may have missed.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Cronister. Liz, did you find the page number for the staff report where I can look at building number 3?
So staff only received elevations for the 5-plex. There is no documentation in the application that was given for a 6-plex. But from email discussions with the applicant, the facade is all the same that you see on the 5-plex. It's just one unit is added, whether that's stepped forward or stepped back. But from my understanding with plan developments, you are approving it as presented tonight, so not having that elevation. I'm not sure what the best way is to move forward with the approval or denial.
That's a great question, Liz.
Yeah,
Nick?
so I think it probably would rely on the applicant providing some sort of statement that those elevations are the same regardless of whether it's building 1, 2, 3, or 4. 3 or 4. If they are, then the Planning Commission can discuss whether the elevations, I'm assuming you're talking about where they front the street on Redwood.
Yeah, just those.
Whether those are appropriate or not. Go from there.
Yeah, because those are the ones I'm obviously most interested in as they engage the street frontage. So,
So you have the elevation of building 1,
yes,
which is the 5-plex. So building 3 is, and I have it on this presentation here. I'm sorry that it didn't make it into the staff report. All we're showing, so this is the 5-plex with the 2 end units, and then the 3 in between. In the 6-plex, it shows it's the same. It's just an additional interior unit. So that facade is the same across the board. It's just adding one interior unit.
Okay. Commissioners, I'll bring it to us for a discussion and or a motion.
I just have a couple comments. One
ahead.
would be make sure you have a rendering next time of the facade that the pedestrian's engaging with. That'll make this conversation go a lot easier. And then the second is I'd like to ask a little bit more about the material choices because the design's a little underwhelming for me. I think the way that the materials start to wrap around the corner and then just stop, I understand you're trying to save money there, but I think wrapping the two buildings on the end with the same material, either be stucco or metal, would just make these more 360 design oriented. And I think that it just detracts from, you know, the human scale of it. Like it's just a facade and that's it. So I think thinking through those things in the future would be beneficial. So those are my comments.
Can I respond?
Yeah, you know, I want to hear this, so I'll let you.
Yeah, I agree. And we have no problem committing to wrapping the building and creating that more pedestrian-friendly feel. If it's, like you mentioned, if it's one material or another, but being congruent there and consistent.
Yeah, I think just making a decision on it, not stopping halfway or a
Yep.
quarter of the way is
And
better.
we can commit to that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I would be ready to make a motion, but I feel like John might, given the applicant is willing to commit to something, John may be better positioned to make a motion. Because it sounds like we have a condition. If
I would just delegate it to staff, but let me see if I can find
I
my
like that one.
motion
I
sheet.
like that.
No, Liz can get a feel for what's going to happen in the future. Things that we pay attention to.
Okay. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the plan development request for the Quincy located at 1106 South Redwood Road with conditions that the applicant look at the end condition of the material that wraps the building. Final approval delegated to staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion from John and a second from Mike. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, can I ask a question on the
Yes.
motion? When you say to look at the material, are you suggesting that it be a different material than what's proposed?
I would suggest that it either be the metal continued around the building or it be just the stucco.
Okay.
One or the other. But
I just want to clarify so we can administer that at permit time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Maureen?
Yes.
Levi?
Yes.
John?
yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Andra?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thanks, Liz,
Thank you.
for all your work.
Thank you.
And with that, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute bathroom break, and we will reconvene. What time is it? We'll reconvene at 6:45. Thank you all. Our last two items are not public hearings. They are other discussions, and we have the Thriving in Place with Susan Lundmark. And I don't have another name, so you'll have to introduce yourself, please.
No worries. Alessandro Rigolon from the University of Utah.
What was your name?
Alessandro Rigolon.
Okay, got it. All right, the time is yours.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much for having us. It's nice to see you all in person.
Susan,
And-
you'll have to speak up
Oh,
or right
okay.
closer to the microphone.
This
I always
better?
say just to the point where you're really uncomfortable is the perfect spot for the
As
microphone.
awkward as possible. Okay. Hi, nice to see you all. Thanks for having us. I'm Susan Lundmark, and I am in the Department of Community and Neighborhoods. I work in the Transportation Division as Transportation Planner and Project Manager. And before you say, what? Transportation and displacement? Rest assured, I worked for the RDA for about 5 years before making a transition to the Transportation Division. So definitely have some experience with real estate and development and transportation and land use connection projects. So I'm really excited to be here and to be part of this project for sure. I'm one of the project managers for this. The other project manager is Angela Price, who's Community and Neighborhoods Policy Director, and who does a ton of work on this project and all kinds of policy at the department level for the city. So we're really lucky to have her. And then joined by Alessandro, who just introduced himself. Do you want to say anything else?
Sure. We, Ivis Garcia, Dr. Garcia and I are part of the team, of the core team that has been working on this project for the past 6 months, 7 months?
Yeah.
Feels like it's been long. Yeah. And I'm in the City Metropolitan Planning Department at the University of Utah. And we've had a few of our classes engaging in this project. And so we're going to talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, I'll talk about the whole team here in just a minute. So for anyone who's not too familiar with this project, its newish name is Thriving in Place. It started out as the Gentrification Assessment and Displacement Mitigation Plan, which is a total mouthful. So it is now Thriving in Place, which is much easier to understand, I think. And since the beginning, like since we drafted the request for proposal, we've had a goal to understand gentrification pressures and also displacement risks in the city for Salt Lake, and to develop a plan of action, like real actions and policy recommendations that can come out of this, that the city and partners can put in place to help people stay here if they choose, and to live and thrive here even as the city grows and changes. So that's our goal. And then this slide shows our consultant team. The city, we got to hire, sorry, this feels really weird. We got to hire a great team with national and local expertise for this project and have the opportunity to work closely in partnership with other people in the city as well as the community. So we have Baird & Driscoll, which is a national leader in affordable housing policy development with a deep commitment to ensuring that those that are most impacted by policy decisions get to be part of the process for shaping those policies. David Driscoll is our project manager from Baird & Driscoll and has the support of several colleagues, including Daisy Quinones, who's on this slide. And the Baird & Driscoll team helps facilitate the overall effort. Oh, did I mess up? Oh, sorry. Sorry. I want to tell you everything about the team and not miss anything, so I'm sort of reading. But they help facilitate the overall effort and lead the policy development aspects of the project. And then we have UC Berkeley's Urban Displacement Project. They're a national leader in analyzing and understanding the forces that drive displacement and gentrification. UDP's director is Tim Thomas. He's leading that work, assisted by his research assistant, or research lead, Julia Greenberg. And UDP Urban Displacement Projects has worked with cities around the country. They advise national policymakers on anti-displacement policies and practices. And then at the University of Utah City and Metropolitan Planning Department, we also have nationally recognized and locally active professors working with us, so Alessandro here and Ivis Garcia. They're leading a lot of the engagement with community and residents and stakeholders for a variety of efforts on this project. So as I said, Angela Price and I are the co-project managers, and then we are assisted by other folks in the city, including Rudy Mathis, who's here tonight to do the next presentation. We also have a city steering committee of 16 departments and divisions, representatives from those departments and divisions who help make up the internal city team. And then also a community working group composed of community advocates and voices and people who can help represent the community at large, especially people who might be at most at risk of displacement. So that's my longest slide. The project is broken up into 2 phases. So the first phase is a listening and learning phase that we're just coming to the end of. Our online survey closed at the end of April, and we are just starting to get into phase 2 to craft collaborative solutions and to come up with some policy recommendations. To do outreach for this and engagement for this effort, we really focused on both broad and targeted methods. So we do have a project website and a full city, well, you could take it from anywhere, but an online survey that anyone could take. We went to community events that were held in the city and presentations to community groups and to community councils. And then we also, in terms of some of our more targeted outreach, we hired community liaisons through the University of Utah's team. And then students were integral to helping conduct intercept on-the-ground surveys to help reach people who might not take online surveys, as well as conducting focus groups, and then several youth workshops that were conducted in schools in Salt Lake City on the west side. If you haven't already been to our website, I encourage you to go check it out. There's quite a bit of information if you want to dig deep, or if you just want to take a quick look and try to understand kind of the basics and where we're going with this project. You can do that too in a pretty short amount of time. And I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the work that Dr. Garcia, myself, and our students have done with 3 classes, and elaborate a bit more on what Sue's just said. So we students went out to do a series of activities to encourage people to visit their website and to take the survey. So in spring 22, with about 50 students from 2 classes going out between February and May on the ground, and we targeted specifically areas that from our preliminary analysis, areas that are at higher risk of displacement. We had about 2,000 door hangers, postcards, 300 posters. Everything was in English and Spanish. 150 stencils on public lands, and tabling at grocery stores, community centers, and events. We gave presentations to several community groups, like 13 community councils, and had done a number of social media outreach, and contacted close to 1,000 organizations through different networks. Go to next. We hired 6 community liaisons who speak different languages to reach different marginalized communities in the city. People who work with school district, with the Utah Housing Coalition, with Black Lives Matter, and other organizations that engage with people of color, as well as with people experiencing homelessness. The liaisons established trust, did several interviews, focus groups. 2 of the 5 focus groups were in Spanish. And we heard a lot of rich ideas around the need for subsidized housing, the desire to achieve home ownership, and other sort of pathways to thriving in place. So Dr. Garcia and her student also led a few youth workshops, 7 total in 3 schools, from elementary to high school. They led interactive activities ranging from writing, drawing, building with objects, everything age appropriate, of course, with different, kids at different levels. And questions were around what is home, what is your experience with neighborhood change, and also what does it mean to actually thrive in place. They talked a lot about changes they see in their communities. They talked about themselves or others being evicted, friends moving to the demolition of naturally occurring affordable housing, as well as some experiencing homelessness. And in total, we engaged 200 children. So these are our numbers. I think they're pretty impressive, not just because we did it, but last time we checked, more than 3,500 people saw the website. We completed more than 2,100 surveys, including 700 in person. I'm glad to report that the ones in person helped us achieve a balanced demographic representation that actually more or less reflects the racial composition of the city. Where, you know, the online surveys generally tend to overrepresent white male homeowners. The Intercept, you know, enabled us to reach people who, you know, reach more renters, more lower income folks, and more folks who were not identifying as white. Total of more than 9,000 community interactions, workshops, focus groups, etc. Something that, if you haven't checked out before, if it doesn't come to your attention, in fall 2021, Dr. Garcia led a class called Community Engagement, where students did story maps for each neighborhood council, where in addition to tracking demographics, people also, students also engage in describing people's experiences of housing, gentrification, and displacement. Really interesting stuff there. And finally, but not less importantly, we had several community working group meetings. We gave two updates to the Human Rights Commission, and presentations to the Salt Lake Community Network, and much more. And we're currently in the process of trying to make sense of all of this.
That's a good segue to what happens next. As I said, the online survey closed at the end of April. So Alessandro and his team and others on just the consultant team are working on analyzing those responses, both citywide and also with key crosstabs for how certain demographics respond in certain ways to the survey and what information we can get from that. Urban Displacement Project is refining their data analysis for their mapping exercises. And in June, we'll be transitioning to that phase 2 of crafting collaborative solutions and presenting summaries of what we've heard and learned both to the City Steering Committee and the Community Working Group here this month. So in terms of Planning Commission and this body and what you all can see, as well as the City Council, we anticipate returning, if possible, to get on the agenda closer to the end of the summer to have a briefing and discussion on some of the policy recommendations that we anticipate coming out of the plan. And then following the city's standard plan adoption process, including a 45-day public comment period, and then Planning Commission hearing with their recommendation, as well as the City Council's plan adoption process that you can see here. And I think with that, we'd just be happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, thank you for your robust engagement. Questions, commissioners? I think that we look forward to you coming back with how you've digested all of the responses and like my thing's tangled up, and how you're going to parse through that.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
So, are you guys also looking at best practices around the country for how other cities are tackling this issue? And we'll weave that into your analysis and recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably both Alessandro and I can have something to say on that. But yes, we certainly are looking at best practices. Both Barrett and Driscoll and Urban Displacement Project are working in other cities around the country. And then certainly through the University of Utah's work, have been looking at other cities as well. Do you want to speak to that too?
Yeah, we've been particularly looking at other blue cities and red states where there are state laws that preempt things like rent control, like Utah, or inclusionary zoning, which is also preempted. And so we're, particularly interested in sort of those contexts where our hands are relatively tied, put it mildly.
Andra?
I guess I have a few questions. First of all, I'd like to see how many of your interviewers have vouchers for the Housing Choice Voucher Program that aren't able to use them. We heard a homeless single mother come to the Planning Commission, the last Planning Commission, who could not use her voucher. This is obviously very heartbreaking from just seeing somebody in that position. It's also a huge waste of money because this is federal money. We don't have to spend a dime right now, and if we can't use them. So my understanding is part of the problem is landlord incentives right now, and it's through I don't know whether you're working in tandem with the Housing Authority of Salt Lake, which administers the voucher program and might be able to work with the voucher. I hope there is an easy fix in terms of landlord incentives or some change to get. I don't think we can, I suspect we will not be receptive to a state law mandating that housing choice vouchers be accepted. My suspicion is that will not be well received, but an incentive for landlords is what some states have done or some cities have done. My other question, I'm wondering what particular cities this Berkeley consulting firm has advised on these matters, because if they're California cities, there is no state in the nation that is losing low-income population at a faster rate than California. So I'm a little concerned that we are not talking about the main problem here, which is housing supply at a regional level. So I don't know, when I see Berkeley involved in housing, I just don't think positive things.
Do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, so first question, survey and interviews. In the surveys, we did not ask whether people have HCVs. There are some open-ended questions where people might have brought it up, so we can look into that. And I believe that there might be someone with the housing choice voucher in the focus groups that we did, mostly on the west side. The problem you're describing about housing choice vouchers is a nationwide problem, that there's a lot of racism, still from landlords, and there's nationwide research showing that unfortunately the acceptance of HCVs is pretty low. California. So I think I don't want to speak for them, but they've worked predominantly in California, but also in some places in Texas, if I remember correctly. And I think we all understand the importance of addressing affordability from the supply side as well. We are also aware that we're proposing a plan for a city, and we would need a regional solution that includes the entire Wasatch Front. And we can't really go beyond the scope of the city limits. But I believe that, we're context aware. The California housing crisis has been built over generations, I would say. And I think we are a little earlier than that in Utah, in the Wasatch Front. So hopefully we can act a bit more proactively than what California has done.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'd be the first to say that California hasn't done it perfectly and is not a perfect model, and that we're looking at all kinds of cities all over the country for some best practices. Did you have a question?
Any other questions, Mike?
I just wanted to say thank you. I was at the Thriving in Place meeting in Glendale towards the end of April and was very impressed by the work that's being done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Levi?
Yeah, I have a question. I haven't heard much about what the city is currently doing. As far as I know, the city has programs because I'm in one of them, 15 years ago, as a poor college student at the University of Utah, I was able to get a killer deal from the city in a house that I bought in Glendale, which I still own. I know a lot of people in Glendale are not aware of that program. I know that's a long-standing program with the city. Are we taking those into account and publicizing them?
Well, so that's not like their purview.
Oh, that isn't? Oh.
No, so they're writing the new plan for the next phase. But I think what is appropriate, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe looking at and making sure you account for a plan to publicize what would become available in Thriving Salt Lake.
Yeah.
To do it better than perhaps Levi's experiencing it happening now.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question, and we do have, I don't know how to use this well enough to bring up our website, but there is a page on the website that has all kinds of resources listed for, housing resources, tenant assistance, legal assistance, current resources and programs for people who need something right away. We do have that, and certainly we'll be updating the website as we come up with additional, ideas and concepts.
Yeah, hopefully as you move forward to the next phase, when you come back to us with a plan, you maybe take a look at additional ways beyond just putting it on your website that you may want to recommend for outreach into specific communities that need that information. Because when you did outreach for your programs, you did a lot of in person and try to help people that wouldn't respond to the online surveys. That's probably very much the same scenario in some communities where they're just don't have access to it very well or not really adept at it. And we other ways in which to reach them with that information, I think would be helpful for the plan that moving forward, and tapping into all your consultants of what ideas they might have for that. I don't want to speak for you, Levi, but
That was perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I may add a couple of things. So we did do an in-depth analysis of what the city currently has in place, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to build on what is there. And from some of the work we've done in the community, we learned that people don't know about many things that are available. There is a lack of information, and there's also a lot programs that are relatively small in size and budget. There's a community land trust program, for example, that few people know about. There's a homeowner down payment program. There's all sorts of different things. And so what somebody that we spoke with suggested is, having caseworker approach to how, to housing assistance, wherein people, work with the community, with communities that are more of a disadvantage and or have lower access to internet or information, and provide that information.
Thank you. I think it's fair to do a review of the existing programs and really outline where they fall short. If they weren't falling short, we wouldn't be in this situation. So we know there's a lot of room for improvement. Any final questions? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment because we brought up California, and I used to do work in California, and one of the things I do think that helped was tying incentives for developers to affordability. One of the things they did was you get a whole nother story of height if you added a certain percentage of affordable housing to your project, and that was tied to the development. I know we don't have a lot of that in the city, and it was kind of a Band-Aid. It wasn't as robust as it could be, but I think that's a great starting point and a way to incentivize developers to include it as part of their performa.
John, were you here when we had the affordable housing overlay, or did you miss that fun
That was
night?
wild.
You missed that fun night, didn't you?
I was here in spirit, I
yeah,
guess.
hold that thought.
Thank you.
It will come back
watch
to
it.
us in the affordable housing overlay.
We have been in contact with the planning division about the affordable housing overlay, and would have some interactions and and exchanges, and we want the projects to be complementary of each other.
Oh, when that comes back up, I'll make sure you're here.
I'll plan on it.
Yeah. Or you could watch that as
Watch
penance.
some of it, and yeah.
Rick, did you have a question as well?
I did. It's actually just a question related to the process from here on. Are you going to issue a draft of recommendations? And about what's the timeline for that?
Yeah, we're planning to come back to this commission probably at the end of the summer, August perhaps, to look at some of those initial policy recommendations. So I don't know that it would be a full draft of the full plan, but some of those policy recommendations that we can talk through and have a discussion on and get input on as the consultants are drafting the plan and moving it towards
I think
a
the
final.
best thing is to provide us with as much as the draft as you can, but it would be very helpful for us if you pull out the parts that you're keenly interested in hearing our feedback on and have questions, but that in our Dropbox we could review as much as the draft as possible. So if we had additional questions, we would bring them up at that time. But those are really good opportunities for you to kind of vet what the things that you are really interested in hearing back from. And if then we have no comments on them, you did good on those. But that would be my suggestion as you approach that. Give us as much to read as possible, but that doesn't mean you have to discuss it all in detailed length when you come back, but definitely have the points that you're looking to hear from us on. Highlight those in the report part, but then give us as much as a draft as possible.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, anything else for this team? All right, thank you. We look forward to when you come back.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to our next item in the discussions period. It's the Moderate Income Housing Plan, Growing Salt Lake City Implementation Plan Amendment. We have Angela up for that.
Angela's actually not able to make it tonight, so we have...
I was going to say, I don't think this looks like Angela,
Ru-
but I didn't want to
Rudy
make
Matt.
any judgment about your parents, how they named you. So I held my mouth.
Yeah. Do I just hook up with this little thing? How do I hook my presentation?
I do not know.
Do you
Maybe Casey or Nick or Aubrey can help you.
Yeah.
I am more ignorant of that than you are.
Oh, you've got yours. Okay.
Yeah.
Full screen.
Yeah, here we go.
We'll just use the same. Yeah, we'll just.
And then just use the arrows.
Okay. Can you hear me all right? Am I
You might
close
have to
enough?
speak up a little bit.
Speak up a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Rudy Mathis here in the stead of Angela Price, who's my boss.
Oh, I actually do see your name on this other part. So
That's all right.
there was two different names happening, and I looked at the wrong one.
That's okay. And yeah, I am here to talk about the affordable or moderate income housing plan amendment that is required to comply with state code. So I'm with Salt Lake City's Department of Community and Neighborhoods, first time here, so glad to be with you. I want to, let's see, okay, there we go. So I want to touch base on two separate things, but noting that we're focusing on the amendment part. But Growing SLC, which is the city's 5-year housing plan, is in its final year. It was adopted in 2018, and we're now in 2022. So we're going to need to make a new housing plan. While we're in the last year, the state, in the most recent legislative session, passed HB 462, which required housing plans to make certain changes to come into compliance. So unfortunately, in our final year, we have to go through an amendment process, which we'll then be implementing in our new housing plan, which will come online over the next year or so. So just know there are two separate processes here. A new plan, which will be informed by the Thriving in Place process that Susan and Alessandro talked about, but that we're focusing on the implementation plan for the existing housing plan, which is Growing SLC. HB 462, which was passed in the 2022 legislative session, requires that every moderate income housing plan address 4 strategies that are outlined within the bill, and that the plan include an implementation plan element. so that the state can kind of benchmark progress. And, overall, that's a really good idea so that these plans can actually yield fruits and start making a difference on housing. It's just the timing was a little bit off for us, given that we're in the last year. So the other thing, the state tied funding to this implementation plan. So in order to be eligible for funding, we have to include at least 4 strategies to work towards in our plan, and then kind of benchmark those in an implementation plan. And in order to be considered for, I always say this wrong, to be eligible for priority consideration for funding, so it doesn't mean that we get priority consideration, it just makes us eligible to be considered for that. We have to include at least 6 strategies in our plan and in the implementation side. HB 462 outlines, I think there are 25 different strategies that can be addressed by a city. And so we just have to pick 6 of those in order to become eligible for priority consideration. And we have to do all this by October 1st of this year. So that's why we're coming here, because over the next little while, we will be, and this slide will show you, we'll be starting the public engagement process. We don't have a full implementation plan ready yet. We're still working out some of the kinks, and I'll go into some of the details a little bit later, but that once it's ready, it will be available at slc.gov/can/housing plan. That's where our current housing plan exists, so if you're interested, you can read Growing SLC there. June 6th is when we'll launch the public engagement period, which will run for the 45 days, after which point we will come back to you for a public hearing for the July 27th meeting. So, we can celebrate Pie and Beer Day and then come and have a moderate income housing plan amendment celebration. So, looking for a recommendation from this body, and then we'll take that to the city council for process. And I can't reiterate enough that we need to have this all done by October 1st in order to comply with state law and be eligible for funding moving forward. The next couple of slides are a list of potential things that could be included in the implementation plan. They are things that the city is currently doing that are in line with Growing SLC, which is our housing plan, and that align with state the strategies outlined in HB 462. Some of these have been before this body. Some of them are done by different divisions or departments within the city, or I guess technically the RDA is not a department in the city; it's a separate entity. But it's things that the city is doing to address its goals. So. We'll be working with City Council to kind of whittle this down and see what they feel that they want to pursue. And that will be what's in the implementation plan that goes to the public. And then, so that's kind of the end. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that this is something that we're doing to come into compliance with state code. And it really is unfortunate that it happened in the last year of our plan, because we're just going to have to do this again in 6 months' time. So anyway, with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
All right, commissioners, any questions for Rudy?
Yeah, can you clarify exactly how much funding is attached to the various? I watched the Utah League of Cities and Towns video, and there was like a silver and a gold, and I was trying to understand like what it meant to be eligible for priority funding. And can you put that in perspective to Salt Lake City's budget?
That's a really good question that we have not been told. They're still defining what it means to be eligible for priority consideration. We have thoughts on what that might mean, but we don't. The state hasn't really said this is what it means. But it is like there's the TIF and TTIF funding, which are transportation funds. There's some American Rescue Plan Act funding that's associated with this, and there's another one. So there's like I think there's 4 funding sources that this is tied to, but I don't know the total amounts and what that would represent on the city's budget.
This is, so I think, I'm really happy to see HB 462. This got me very excited. Because as many people know, California tried to kind of force cities to upzone, and they didn't at all because there was no compliance. And so I guess my hope is that the state will both have strong carrots and strong sticks here. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that's what I would love to hear the state define this really clearly for us.
Yeah, and I do know if you were to talk to John Larson, the transportation director, he would say that we want to make sure that we're eligible for priority funding or priority consideration. While I don't know a dollar amount off the top of my head, it's a significant amount for the transportation team, right? They do a lot of projects with TIF funding and TTIF funding, and so if we were to not have that, we would not be able to have the city that we want to have moving forward, because we would be hamstrung by funding, which the transportation team already is. They already don't have enough funding for what they want to do, and to further limit that would be detrimental to the city's goal of creating an equitable place to live. So we would love to see, more tightly what that means from the state. We just don't know quite yet.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Rudy. We look
you so
forward to
much.
seeing you come back in July.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well.
All
Is
right.
somebody using this next? Do I need to keep this open?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
We have one more, so.
I think we're just going to be over here.
Oh, you're just going to do, okay, turn it off, thanks. All right, we have Nick, our illustrious director, giving us our updates on policies and procedures.
So, also in line with some changes at the state legislature, we are proposing and put on the agenda a discussion about policies and procedures. Some of that is dealing with virtual meetings, which we want to be able to have that option still. Logistically, we haven't quite have all of our resources and planning in a row to be able to do that, but we want to be able to make sure we have that option. And so the state changed some requirements for what that means, and so we took the opportunity to add that to the policies and procedures. So we're in compliance with that. It's basically about how we constitute a quorum when we have an electronic meeting, how votes are taken, things like that. We also looked at a couple of other elements of the policies and procedures that we wanted to get in here. One is a couple years ago there was a requirement for planning commissions to have a certain amount of training, including 1 hour on, there's an hour that's required under state law that all new commissioners have to have prior to being able to participate. We do that during our orientation with commissioners. But we wanted to make sure we got that in the policies and procedures. One of the other significant, we had to add what basically is considered a special or unusual circumstance for conflict of interest and constituting a quorum. So we've added that. We also, probably one of the more significant things that impacts almost every agenda item that you look at is voting. As we looked at it, we couldn't find a reason why the person who chairs the meeting doesn't have a vote. And so we're actually removing that. So every commissioner has a vote. The one thing that we did add is that the person who is conducting the meeting, because they do have the ability, whether they want it or not, to heavily influence outcomes, they were the last person to vote during a roll call vote.
I don't mind being the last person to vote, but I don't think I influence anybody. Honestly, I talk a lot, but that doesn't mean I influence
some
anyone.
examples. When we, as a city, had a board of adjustment, we had a specific chair who, I'll just say it how it is, I think browbeat people into voting the way he wanted. And it turned out to be really damaging to the city for a number of reasons. So there is that ability if a person is put into that position who wants to do that, could do that. And so that was one of the changes. Based on so at the last meeting, the Planning Commission did ask us to put some order and decorum policies in there, so we've added those. Based on tonight's agenda, we also want to add something that isn't in the current draft that you have that deals with the consent agenda and clarifies that if something's pulled off the consent agenda and it doesn't require a public hearing, that it doesn't need a public hearing. And the way they read now, it's kind of indicates that it might, but that's not the intent. It was never the intent of that when we set it up. That's why we put minutes on the consent agenda and any other Planning Commission business that isn't related to a land use decision on there. So what we'd like to add is some consent agenda clarification. I'm going to read it just so you guys have it. Items that require Planning Commission approval but do not require a public hearing, such as approval of minutes and approvals of time extensions, may be removed from the consent agenda by the chair for the purpose of discussion prior to a decision, but do not require a public hearing.
So my question is, and I already put my thing away, but in the policies and procedures, it specifically outlines, opening up each consent agenda to public hearing, to public comments. And that's what I would also look at, like, cleaning up, because then we've got these conflicts happening.
Right.
So somehow worded it, or, clean it up so that you've got what you just read, but then take out all the other part of, like, okay, you open it up to a public comment period, and then maybe do a sub-point that states under that, if a specific item is removed and meets their criteria, then it can be opened up for a public hearing. As the policies and procedures read now, it basically says every consent agenda item is open for a public. So let's remove that conflict of those two, because we already knew we had a conflict with what's there now with what ordinance and potential state statute is. So let's remove that part and, like, make it so it's really clear for future, where a consent agenda item is, it's applicable for a public hearing, or that it can be removed and then may be placed as a public hearing.
Yep.
Just so that it's super clear from now on, because
What we will do is that we will take a look at that the consent agenda stuff, and we'll bring something back to you for that, so that we're not trying to make that decision in this meeting.
Yeah, I think if it was just adding that would be fine tonight, but it's conflicting with what's in there, and we might as well take this opportunity to clean that up. The decorum stuff that you cleaned up, I thought was really fine. So I appreciate you taking a look, but I think that the consent agenda items are just messy. Any other update from you?
I think that was all I wanted to cover. There's a few kind of grammar, spelling, edit types of things that are in there. As far as action by the Planning Commission, if we're going to bring something back,
I would prefer we just wait until
we can just throw it on the next agenda.
Yeah.
Because the next agenda also, I think it only has one public hearing and then 3 work session items.
Yeah, if you then add in the new draft, and then we can read that as a whole. Because when I read this last one, and one of the comments I made to Michaela was there were 2 different sections that when you clarified virtual meetings and then that special and unusual circumstance then conflicted with the attendance or the abstention of votes, that they, it would be special if we had to keep them in the room if we didn't have a quorum, but then, so we had conflicts there. So I'd like to read the whole thing again.
Okay.
Just to make sure
The one thing that I will say is that it's fine to put that on the next agenda, but we likely will be having a virtual meeting just because of the level of interest of an agenda item on the that would be the June 22nd public hearing. So
We'll
it's
be having a
10
hybrid or just virtual?
It would be hybrid, sorry.
Okay.
Just,
No, I think if you clean that stuff up, it should be just fine next agenda.
right.
I just wanted to see all of it so that there weren't like conflicting things in different parts that, because you looked at one and then when I read it, I was like, well, we don't need that there then, if you
Okay.
took care of it there. That's all. And then we can vote on it next agenda item. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay.
Unless people had heartburn with what was there tonight. No, see, I think you're good. All right. Is anybody else enamored with the policies and procedures like myself that you want to comment to Nick, or are we good?
What are reasons to abstain that you think are good reasons to abstain?
Well, the policies and procedures as I read them, but please clarify, Paul and or Nick, is the reason that it's written in there read to me like you need to list why you're abstaining to really publicly, transparently show you're not abstaining because you have a conflict of interest. If you had a conflict of interest, you need to recuse yourself at the beginning instead of like participating from everything and then saying, oh, I'm abstaining because I have a conflict of interest.
So I'll bring up an example. We had a virtual meeting not too long ago where one of the commissioners joined during the public hearing portion of an item. And we suggested, when we noticed that that person joined, we called it out and said, just for the record, Commissioner so-and-so joined after the public hearing, and we suggested that commissioner abstained from voting because they missed some of the information. And so that might be a reason. It's also quite possible that somebody, we rely so heavily on technology that if somebody wasn't able to get access to staff reports for whatever reason.
I abstained for that once, like
things like
way
that.
long ago.
Yeah, those things happen.
Yeah. I couldn't
and so
open it.
that would be an example of a situation where you would abstain because you either weren't there for the entire item or you didn't have the same information that the rest of the commissioners had to be able to participate in that decision-making process.
I mean, I guess if you tried to abstain and then you said just because you don't like it, that probably wouldn't fly. I just don't like this, I'm going to abstain because you don't want to vote. But
What if I just don't have an opinion? Like there was some zoning change that came, I mean, I can think of 2 or 3 recent examples where I was like, I don't know. I mean, is that like inadequate? I don't know. I don't really have an opinion.
I mean, I feel like as long as it's meeting the standards and it's a zoning change, so we're giving a recommendation. We're not the final decision makers.
Yeah, I think both of them were zoning changes that I really just didn't feel like.
If it meets the standards, then that's kind of where you're directed and obligated. Like, I'm reviewing the standards. I agree that it's meeting them. So that's where, even if you don't care, like you need to.
Yeah, but if a zoning change is, it's recommended.
Right,
So that's
you
advisory.
need to vote. I think. Yeah, I don't think you can say like, I just don't care about this one.
Even if it's, but if I really just don't have an opinion after the full hearing.
Yeah, I think that's our role, is that you need to.
I
If
have to
you
form
still
an
don't have an
opinion.
opinion, you need to look
On a
back at
zoning
the
change,
standards
okay.
and be like, yeah, it meets the standards. It's not rising up there for me, but then you need to make your recommendation.
Zoning change. Okay, all right, fine.
What if the vibe is way off?
On a zoning change.
on anything.
On anything. Look at the standards, and if you feel like the vibe is also meaning that it's not meeting those standards, then you can articulate that with your vote.
Are you considering having hybrid meetings in which, like, I can't be here for the meeting, but I would participate from wherever it is I am?
I don't know.
Are we doing that kind of
Is it hybrid for the public, but we're supposed to be here in person, or hybrid for everyone?
So it could be both. That's why we have to update the policies and procedures so that it addresses how to determine attendance if some commissioners are attending electronically.
Who has
and
done a
some are
hybrid meeting?
Anchor location.
Who
What was
has
that?
conducted a hybrid meeting as of yet? Anyone at the city? Or are we pioneering hybrid
No,
meetings?
the city council has been doing.
Has it been doing hybrid
Have
meetings?
been doing hybrid. They have. They have more resources, particularly on the tech side of things, than we do. And so it's taken us a while to be able to figure out how to use it and make sure that we have the staff available to do it. And so that's the primary reason. Getting back to the abstention thing, I think another really pertinent example is if somebody thinks that they may have had ex parte communication on an item, they can abstain from participation on that and stay in the room, right? So they would be like, hey, I was approached, I had a discussion, I'm going to abstain from any discussion on this, but I'm not going to leave the room, I'm going to stay, because there's not really a conflict of interest there. It's a different type of situation. So that could be another example where somebody may decide that they want to abstain from something, and it's probably a legitimate reason for
Didn't
that.
I read, though, in the policies and procedures that if you feel like you've had an ex parte discussion, you can bring it up and the other commissioners can vote whether they think it warrants you abstaining? Or can you just say, like, I'm going to abstain because I was approached by this? Or can you then say, hey, I was approached, what do you all think? Do you get to choose?
I think you can do any of those things.
Okay. Because I remember reading that then the other commissioners can vote and say, like, no, we think that's still fine.
Yeah, but
or
even
no,
if,
we think that's bad.
Even if the commission as a whole thinks it's okay, that person may not feel that way.
Got it.
So they can stay in the room, they can be at the table.
Right.
Maybe they don't ask any questions, they don't participate in the discussion, and then when it comes time to voting, they just say, I abstain. And
That is
would
outlined.
be reason enough.
That is outlined in the policies. So, yeah.
I would strongly encourage you not to be an active participant in those ex parte communications. We had a commissioner several years ago who now works in the mayor's office who came to us and said, a friend of mine reached out on Facebook and told me, hey, I understand the planning commission's hearing this thing. And his response was, I can't talk to you about this. Which
I
is,
remember
that's,
that.
so if you get approached, that's the correct response. Sorry to.
I remember that one.
Yes, thank you.
And he did bring it before, and we all said we think it's okay. But if you ever have questions about those ex parte, reach out to leadership or Paul and just be like, hey, this has happened, and I'm not sure how this falls. The more open you are about it, the better.
Nick, I see something really exciting under the consent agenda items. It suggests that you could put something on the consent agenda item if no comments have been received by the public in opposition to a land use application up to the date the agenda is posted. Have we lost opportunities to use that in recent months?
We've had lots of things with no comments. But usually there's
most applications we at least get some comment on, and so we haven't done that. We did have one of the applications tonight, which actually had the most public input. We actually didn't receive any comments up to the publishing of the staff report.
I read that too.
We got them all here. So that's kind of, I think we use that at our discretion a little bit. So, an example of that, sometimes, I think like a bar downtown is a good example. Those require a conditional use. We actually can approve those at a different hearing outside of the Planning Commission, which we usually do. But if the next available meeting is a Planning Commission meeting, we'll put it on there. That might be one of those types of things that we can throw on the consent agenda, because we rarely, in a downtown or in the industrial area, we don't get input on that. So.
Okay. Any final thoughts for Nick? All right, well, I look forward to that exciting read in the next staff report. But with that, I think we are adjourned for this evening. Thank you all.
Well, I was going to throw this out. I went to South Salt Lake's training, and they talked about this book, and I strongly recommend it for everybody because it actually adds a lot of clarity to the decisions we make. There's a lot of case studies. You guys probably are familiar with it, but I thought it was a pretty interesting talk that they gave. So anyway.
The author of that book is one of our appeals hearing officers, just so.
Yeah, he mentioned that, but I thought it was pretty interesting, some of the stories.
It is. If anybody is interested and wants a copy of that, in fact, maybe we'll just buy some so that you guys can have access to them. And we'll gladly make that available.
I may have some available. The mayor's office had them and they're not using them.
Okay, we have some.